Number 1. So this just happened to me and I'm pretty rattled. Across the road from me is a park, and the layout is pretty much a low valley surrounded by hills and forest. All the houses are across the forest on the upper half. The park is very secluded and you can't really see it unless you're inside the park or at the opening at the top of the hill. At the top of the main hill is a playground, and on the other side of the park is a small path that goes deep into the forest beside the other hill, and a field at the top of the hill, probably almost a football field length away from the playground. I go into the forest for runs once in a while because of how secluded it is from everything, and it being right after Easter, I really needed a run. So I bring my dog, a small Australian shepherd named Lily. I usually let her off her leash once we get to the top of the hill, and she goes running. She's very hyper all the time, but this time I felt weird, like I should keep her close. I ignored the feeling and let her off her leash anyways. She got 2 feet away from me and stopped dead in her tracks and let a super low growl out. I've never heard her make such a scary noise in my life. Suddenly, this very large, fat man jumped out of the side of the forest yelling at my dog and telling her to shut up. So I quickly grab her and put her on her leash and slowly make my way across the park to the opening in the forest. I feel his eyes burning into the back of my head, so before I go into the forest, I look back at him with my peripherals, and he's just standing there in the same spot, staring at me from across the park. I start my walk into the forest and suddenly get this shiver up my back and feel like I want to puke. I snag another look behind, and he's walking towards the path that I've just went into. My dog is squealing and whinging and acting so strange, so I just jog into the forest till I know for sure that I'm out of his sight. I jump off the path and into the forest and run up the hill and hide behind some trees. Sure enough, I look over and he's practically running into the forest after me and runs right by me. At this point my dog is almost peeing herself, so I run up and across the field and back home. I watched out of my window, waiting for him to come out of that public walkway, because it's right across from my house. But instead, he comes out from the field. If he had intentions of taking a hike through the forest, he would have exited the path on the other side, or come out and go across the park to use the public walkway and leave. But he chose to go halfway through the path, and then through a bunch of trees and across a muddy field. I have no doubt that he was looking for me. His intentions? I have no idea. I can't help but think we have so many small kids in my neighborhood, and I'm just so lucky that it was me that he locked onto, and not one of those other poor kids. Fat man, I don't know what your intentions were, but I hope we never meet. Number 2. My boyfriend, who I live with, works as a teacher in a town about 15 minutes away by train. He gets home more or less at the same time every day, give or take an hour or so. I, on the other hand, work from home. In late January of this year, we'd gotten in a pretty big fight about something stupid. I can't even remember what it was about now, but it was one of those fights where we didn't speak to each other, text, call, or anything the whole next day. So this afternoon I was laying in bed getting work done. It was a Tuesday, and I was pretty sure his last class finished at 1 PM on Tuesdays, meaning he'd surely be home at 2:30. But around 1 PM, I heard the front door open and shut. I thought, I guess he's home an hour early today. It was normal for him to skip his last class every once in a while, so I didn't really think anything of it. In fact, I was mostly mentally preparing for the awkward post-fight, "Hey, how is it going?" conversation. So I continued to lie in bed and do my work and wait for him to come in and change his clothes. The bedroom door was closed, and I had earplugs sort of half in, as I usually do when I'm working, but I could hear the heavy footsteps of him walking around the apartment, as he always does. If we hadn't been mid-fight and I wasn't so preoccupied with the awkwardness of it all, I might have noticed it was strange how slow the footsteps were, or how long he spent walking around the living room. but I was caught up in the dramatics of the fight and didn't think about it. I was just lying there, waiting and waiting for him to finally come in. Finally, the bedroom door slowly opened just a few inches. I turned my head towards the door and prepared to give him a sort of awkward smile. But the door didn't open more than a few inches. I looked and saw that it was a woman's hand with red nail polish on the doorknob. Whoever was there slowly closed the door just as they had opened it, without entering the room. I jumped out of bed, ripped out my earplugs, and sort of froze there for a few seconds while thinking rapidly. My first thought, that was not my boyfriend. Then I thought, could that have been his mum, his sister, the landlady? For some reason I concluded that surely it was his mum or sister, so I opened the bedroom door and walked into the living room. There wasn't anyone there, but the room smelled heavily of women's perfume. Then I came to my senses and realized that his mum and sister didn't have keys and have never come over before. The landlady has never entered without permission. This was a stranger. I ran back into the bedroom and shut the door, now shaking heavily. There is a balcony connected to the bedroom, so despite the cold January rain, I stood on the balcony and called my boyfriend. He picked up, and I asked him if his sister or mum might come over unannounced. He told me,
"No, don't move. I'm calling the police now."
The police were there in minutes and searched the whole apartment. Of course, nobody was there by this point. It was weird though. Nothing was missing from the apartment despite us keeping a jar full of money right in the entrance. Nothing was even touched. In fact, it seemed like the intruder just came straight to the bedroom, saw my legs on the bed, panicked and left. Plus, you can't open that big wooden front door without a key. For a few days my boyfriend and I were convinced that it was just the landlady being nosy. I began to feel better. Nevertheless, we demanded that the landlady change our locks. When she came to change them with her husband, she made a discovery. There was a square area by the keyhole that had been scratched away with something. The landlady said surely someone used tools to break into the apartment. Then, a day or two later, my boyfriend told me, "I have to tell you something, but don't freak out." He told me that the orange kitchen scissors were missing. I obviously freaked out. I tore the apartment apart looking for those scissors. It's been 6 months and those scissors are gone. So the whole thing is just creepy and weird. A stranger breaks into a nice apartment, but doesn't touch or take anything valuable, but rather takes scissors from the kitchen, goes right to the bedroom, sees someone in bed, and immediately leaves? I never got to meet the person who opened the door that day. I hope I never do. Number 3. Towards the end of December 2016, my boyfriend of 7 years and I moved into our first apartment together. We decided we wanted a 2-bedroom apartment with 1.5 baths. We live in a college town, so anything in the actual town was pretty expensive. We had the choice to get a small apartment that was pricey and in town, or a bigger apartment for less money just about 2 miles outside of our hometown. We stupidly chose the latter. The apartment complex was technically in our hometown, but it was also extremely close to the neighbouring town, which was a little less safe. I should mention now that we brought our 2 dogs with us, who I will call Inky and Aris. Inky and Aris are both Pomeranian mixes, who only weigh about 15 pounds each. Anyway, the first couple of months in the apartment were great, and it was so nice to have freedom from our parents. One February night, my boyfriend, Christian, came home from work at 8 PM. Around 9 he decided to take a shower. He brought his dog into the apartment with him, and I was in my room on my computer with my dog, Inky. There was a large window in my room and Inky was looking out of it. Suddenly, he started barking and squeaking really loudly. I could tell that he saw a dog outside, but I thought nothing of it because people just always took their dogs out at night. He then ran into the living room and looked out of the window there. He was still barking and going a little crazy, so I followed him. I got just a few feet outside of my room when I heard someone at the door. The sound I heard was a key in the door, jiggling and struggling to turn the key. I heard the metal jingling and someone twisting the key. At first, I thought it was a maintenance worker because we had one in our apartment earlier that day, but it was late, around 9 PM, and maintenance wouldn't come that late. At this point, Christian came out of the bathroom in a towel because he had heard Inky barking. He and his dog, Aries, ran to the front door to see what was going on with Inky. I heard him yell to me, "There is a dog!" I thought Christian had opened the door and saw a person with their dog walking in the hallway. Our dogs hate other dogs, so I ran to Christian to help. I saw my dog, Inky, so I slammed the door shut. Christian went to put a shirt on, and my heart was racing because I didn't know exactly what was going on. I asked him where his dog, Aries, was, and he told me that he ran after the other dog. Christian came back to the front door with his shirt on. He opened the door and found Aries sitting, like a good boy, at the front door, just waiting to be let back in. After both of our dogs were safe and back in our apartment, we talked about what had just happened. What I learned was that by the time Christian got to the front door the first time, he saw Inky at the front door barking. The front door was wide open, and standing there in our doorway was a man wearing a black hoodie. He had with him his large black dog. It must have been a Rottweiler or another large breed of dog. Keep in mind, Christian was still in a towel only. The man said nothing to Christian, and Christian said nothing to the man. Aries, Christian's dog, chased the man and his dog away, and after they had left, Aries came back to our front door and waited for us to let him back in. I called my dad, who came over immediately, and we told him everything that happened. That man broke into our apartment, and it was the scariest moment of my life. I thought that we were going to get hurt. The scariest part was that this man had a key to our apartment building and the apartment itself. No one could get in without a key, and keep in mind that this was not a forced entry. I only realized later that it must have been an inside job. Christian and I weren't home when the maintenance guy came earlier that day. It didn't occur to us to put away our MacBooks or iPads. The worker must have seen our nice things. He must have figured that since no one was home in the afternoon, no one would be home that night either. I think he gave the key to one of his friends so they could come back to rob the place. I'm so thankful to Inky and Aries. Inky alerted us that someone was there, and Aries chased the man and dog away. I don't know what would have happened if we didn't have the pups with us. Christian came face to face with the man in the hood. I was lucky enough not to meet him, thanks to our courageous dog. Our apartment was broken into again a month later. The intruder again had a key. This time I was home alone, but my dad had bought me a lot of door barricades, so I was more prepared and safe. We learnt that our apartment complex had a history of crime. In April of 2017, a 19-year-old man was killed on the street on which our apartment complex was. In May 2017, after living in our apartment for 5 months, we decided that 2 break-ins and 1 homicide was enough for us. We broke our lease and moved back into our safe hometown. Number 4. This happened about 5 years ago, after my fiancée and I had been living in our house for a little over a year. I'm 6 feet tall and about 225 pounds. I've always been naturally muscular, and I'm told that I have an intimidating demeanor. My fiancée is 5'2" and weighs maybe 130 pounds. Tiny little thing. Our house is a bi-level home where you walk in the front door and there are 2 half staircases going up to the living room or down to the basement. The only access to our backyard is through the sliding glass door in the upstairs living room and down the stairs from our deck. This is important to remember. During this time, I partied a lot, way more than I should have. I was between jobs and it was towards the end of the holidays, so my interest in finding a new job wasn't quite what it should have been. Many of these nights I was out partying and I would end up just crashing with friends, which meant my fiancée spent many nights alone with our 3 dogs. I had a serious problem with substance abuse, primarily alcohol, and I'm sad to say that I was letting it get the better of me. Fast forward a couple of months and I had just found a new job that had random drug and alcohol tests. I had been sober all of 2 days and had begun repairing my relationship with my fiancée when she told me how glad she was that I was sleeping at home again. I thought nothing of it and kissed her on the head and told her that I was too, and that I loved her. Later that night, my fiancée and I were watching TV downstairs when I thought I heard something moving in our backyard. The dogs heard it too, but I dismissed it because they just perked up their ears and really didn't seem to be alarmed. A moment later I heard the noise again and my fiancée very quickly mutes the TV and gives me a very nervous look. "Did you hear that?" she asked, looking very uncomfortable. I told her that it's probably just a few of the neighbouring cats playing in our bushes, as there are quite a few outdoor cats living in the area. But she shook her head and began insisting that this wasn't the case. Before I could even ask her what made her so sure, I hear a sliding glass door upstairs fly open. All 3 of the Great Danes and myself are on our feet in an instant. The dogs let out the most ferocious sounding barks I've ever heard and tore ass up the stairs with me right behind them. As I'm running the first set of stairs, the dogs are reaching the top of the second set and I see the sliding glass door slam, closed, and the silhouette of a man running away. I get to the door and fling it open, and the dogs shove me out of the way to chase after this would-be intruder. I grab my flashlight and run out into the backyard. I had just made it down the deck stairs when I see the dogs freaking out at the back fence. I sprint over and jump the fence just in time to see the man reaching the opposite fence and trying to get over it. He was covered head to toe in black clothing, a thick black hoodie with the hood pulled tight to conceal his face, and jet black cargo pants. Without any regard for my personal safety, I charge the man and just barely miss getting a hold of him as he makes it over the fence. Once more, I follow him over and come around in the front of my neighbour's house just in time to see him hop into an old beaten up pickup and speed off. I watch for a moment as he tears out of the neighbourhood and disappears into the night. I run back home as fast as I can to check on my fiancée and make sure that she's okay. When I walked into the house, she was sitting in the upstairs living room, surrounded by all 3 of our Great Danes and clutching the biggest knife we own. She was obviously shaken up, but ultimately she's a very strong woman and told me that she was ready in case I got in trouble. After calling the cops, giving statements and triple checking to make sure every door and window in the house was locked up tight, we decided to watch another movie as neither of us were tired after the adrenaline rush we had just been through. During the movie, I asked her what made her so sure before that it wasn't just cats playing in the yard. What she told me was enough for me to decide it was time to change my whole life. She said that for about a month now, she'd been hearing strange noises coming from all around the house late at night. She would hear footsteps outside and occasionally what sounded like whispering. When I asked her why she never told anyone, she just shook her head and said that she didn't know. After hearing this, I came to the realization that whoever this man was, he knew that I was never home at night and that my fiancée essentially was all alone most of the time. Fortunately for us, he somehow missed the fact that we have 3 Great Danes, and for whatever reason on this night, he decided not to check and make sure that she was all alone again. Since that day, I've been 100% sober from everything, 5 years now, and I have not left my fiancée alone overnight since. Our relationship has never been stronger, and our 3 Great Danes are 3 of the best dogs anyone could ask for. In the end, this experience has changed my life completely for the better, but creepy wannabe rapist, burglar, whatever you are, let's not meet for your sake. Number 5. This happened to my friend Amy when we were children. Just for a bit of background, we were only around 5 years old at the time, living in central Victoria, Australia in a small country town. Amy grew up in a quiet part of town. There was never crime in this town when we were young. It was safe. She would often tell her family that the feet visited her during the night. Her parents would just laugh, thinking that it was her overreactive imagination. This went on for months, Amy talking about visits from the feet during the night. Her parents put it down to her having an imaginary friend. Amy would say that the feet would come into her room and just stand there, sometimes for up to 10 minutes. Amy would try to talk to the feet, but she never got a reply from them. She would often see them walk past her bedroom door throughout the night. It wasn't until push came to shove that her parents believed her. One night, the whole family awoke to a loud bang in the house. Her dad got up and went out to investigate. There was a strange man sitting on their couch, eating away happily like nothing was out of the ordinary. The police were called and he was escorted out. And it turns out that this man had been coming into their house for months. As soon as their lights went out, he let himself in, keeping in mind that this was a small town and no one ever locked their doors. The feet that Amy would talk about were his. She only ever saw his feet because she slept on the bottom bunk of a bunk bed. From where she would lie, she could never see above his waist. The loud bang that alerted the parents of their visitor was because Amy's mum had left the dishwasher door open. He had gotten so used to navigating around their house in the dark that he tripped over it because it was normally closed. Amy and I are now 25, and this story still creeps me out. Number 6. So this story is about my mother. It was about 21 years ago when my mother was pregnant with a beautiful child, me. She was invited to her friend's bridal shower in a really small town outside of where we lived. Mind you, we're from Kentucky, so when you travel in between small towns, you take the creepy back roads. She said when she left it was about 11 PM. She was driving in her old Nissan Sentra on a road that everyone calls Death Lane because so many crashes occur here. People like to speed around the hairpin turns like idiots. She was about halfway home when this truck kept riding her ass. She slowed down and pulled in the shoulder to let him pass on the one-lane road. He slowed also as he stared at her and drove by. A little creeped out, she shrugged and just kept driving. About a mile down the road, she came upon the man with his truck parked horizontally in the road. My mother stopped a ways back wondering what was up. Then, she saw the man getting out of the truck, and in his hand was what seemed like a knife. My mum had nowhere to go with only ditches on the sides and no way to turn around. She decided to take the ditch and of course got stuck. She was desperately fumbling to get out when, miraculously, another truck arrives, forcing her assailant to move his and leave. The other truck had a husband and a wife inside, and they ran to my mother's aid. They not only got her out of the ditch, but they saved her life, unbeknownst to them. When she arrived home, she went straight to bed, shaken badly by the night's events. Number 7. This is an incident that happened to my mother when she was a kid. My mum was about 8 when this happened, so it was the mid-70s. This happened in a small rural town in Canada, so stranger danger wasn't a big thing there. My mum was leaving school, and an older, dirty-looking man pulled up in a beat-up old sedan and told her that he knew her parents and that they had asked him to pick her up. Side note about my step-grandfather. He was an alcoholic, abusive asshole who hung around a bunch of equally slimy losers, and my mum tried to avoid him and his friends as much as possible, so it didn't seem odd to her that she didn't recognize a friend of her parents. She got in his car and was completely oblivious to the fact that something was wrong as he started driving, because he was headed towards her house. In retrospect though, she said it made sense that he took that route because her house was right near the edge of town on a fairly secluded road, so he was taking a route out of town that avoided the more populated areas. The man, unaware that he was heading to my mum's house, approached my mum's home and my grandma happened to be standing out in the front yard gardening. My mum piped up, assuming that he was about to pull up in front of the house and let her out, and said thank you. Remember, she hadn't said a word up to that point. She was a very quiet kid. The driver, confused, looked over at her and followed her gaze to the woman standing on the lawn in front of them. Since it was a pretty remote road that didn't get much traffic, my grandma glanced up at the approaching car. She saw my mum in the car and met eyes with the driver. Knowing that he'd been seen by my grandmother and could be fairly easily identified, he decided it was not worth it. He stopped the car and let my little mum out and sped off out of town. My mum remembers my grandmother collapsing on the lawn in a fit of tears, freaking out, and my mother being completely oblivious to the very real danger she'd just been in. Thank goodness my grandmother liked gardening. Number 8. Okay, obligatory backstory. I live in a tiny town in northern Kentucky. When I say tiny, I mean microscopic. Nice neighborhood, if a little stereotypically southern. Low crime rate and everyone knows everyone. Lots of fundamentalists, lots of pickup trucks. Not my particular cup of tea as an adult, but on the whole, it seemed like a very safe place to grow up. The city is so small, you can get from one end to the other end in about 20 minutes on foot. Big football town, not much else to do really. The biggest points of interest are the church, the football field, and the Kroger. This happened to me when I was 16 years old. It was a typical Friday night, and I was at home watching stuff and hanging out with my kid brother, who was 9 at the time. We recently had new neighbors move in next door, and their kid, Austin, was his age. They became best friends pretty much immediately. There's always a football game on Friday nights in season, and the entire town is there. Lots of my friends, and his friends too. I wasn't partial to the games. Once I had seen one, I had seen them all. I would still occasionally walk down to the field and meet up with buddies to do something after, but that's about the extent of it. My phone rings, and my brother gets it first. I'm quite sure we were playing a video game of some kind, and around this time, I'm fairly sure it was Smash Bros. Melee on the old GameCube. He was intimidatingly good for his age, and we had a nice sibling rivalry going. He always played with Roy, and I with Marth. These matches were absolute nail-biters. He hangs up and tells me Austin is at the game with his folks, and can we please go down and get him? I didn't want to be down there in a huge crowd of sweaty rednecks and told him so. But Jen, his mum says he can't walk home without us. He wants to go home and hang out, and we can do a 3-person tournament. Come on, Jen, please. Fuck it. Fine, okay, let's go. It's a 10-minute walk maximum, and at least we wouldn't have to stay. We'll go down, and we're grabbing Austin. We're noping it back to here to play some melee. We head up our dead-end street, hang a left and start down the main road. The sports complex is on this road, and it's just at the bottom of a hill. It was about twilight, and from at the top of the hill, we could already hear the marching band and the cheering. I didn't see many folks around, but nothing looked unusual. I really didn't expect to see anyone. Pretty much everyone was down at the game. Looking ahead, I could see parked cars lining the street, with the bulk of them right by the turnoff to the sports complex. He's doing the typical kid brother things as we walked. Hey Jen, did you know owls can turn their heads almost completely around? Hey Jen, me and Austin had a shoe throwing contest and my shoe went so far I almost couldn't see it anymore. Hey Jen, look at this flower, it's awesome. At about the halfway mark, I see a gold SUV pull up across the street, just opposite where we were walking. It sits for about 10, maybe 15 seconds, and then a man gets out, just as we were passing by, so that he's behind us. Older guy, maybe mid-40s. In retrospect, he screamed creeper. Weasel face, tall and wiry. Weird fucking smile. At the time, however, I didn't think twice. Of course, just a guy going to the game, probably meeting up with his family. Brother on my left, me on the right, we keep walking normally. After about 30 seconds or so, I hear shuffling. I turn around out of reflex, just to glance at what's going on. This guy is gaining on us. Okay, no big deal. He's probably trying not to miss anything. He'll probably walk right on past. I would have loved to keep a brisker pace myself, but I had the kid brother in tow, and his 9-year-old legs just can't handle speed walking. We keep walking as usual, but now I have made a mental note. A little more time goes by, maybe a minute, and I start thinking, wonder why he hasn't breezed on by us. The guy sure looks like he was in a hurry, so I turn around again. This man is right behind us, and I mean close enough for me to see the creepiest smile I've ever seen on the face of a person. Only he wasn't behind us per se. He was directly behind my brother, and when I happened to glance back, he had his arms out in front of him. He was reaching for my brother and almost had a hold of his upper right arm. I caught this motherfucker nearly in mid-snatch. I reached out my left hand and put it around my brother's back. Probably 5 seconds went by, but it felt like a lot longer than that. After I had an arm barrier, I do a quick scan of the street. There is no one else around, no witnesses, no help. I'm only 16. This guy's a lot bigger than me. What the fuck am I gonna do? I lean down and say, as quietly and calmly as I can, "Come on, Ross, let's get there. I bet I can go faster than you." I start to speed walk, and so does my brother. I have my arm on his back and I'm half pushing him, rushing him along as fast as he can walk. I can see the sports complex and it's just down the hill. We are about a minute or so away at most. After about another 30 seconds or so, I'm not quite sure, but the whole thing seemed to go by in slow motion, and I turn around again. The guy is speed walking too. He's matching our pace to keep right behind my brother, and he's gaining again. Now, I really start to panic. He is really after us, and there is no other explanation. I don't know him, and I almost just caught him grabbing the kid. Now, he's almost in grabbing distance again. He's picking up speed and he's fucking smiling. Well, sneering. It was a predatory look. I turn back around, and I see that we are so close to the stadium. So fucking close. If we can just get down there a little more. The property opens up, and there will be people everywhere. I have to get down to all those people, right now. I try to sound calm, but I'm sure I didn't at this point. "Let's run, Ross. Come on, I'll race ya." And we take off running. I'm looking more at him than what's ahead of me. I'm trying to keep him in my sight the entire time. He thinks it's a game. He smiled and started running his little heart out. I remember feeling a tiny speck of relief. Oh good, he doesn't know he's about to get raped and murdered. And he's pretty fast. He's in it to win it. I see the entrance to the stadium, and I think we gotta be home free by now. I turn around, and this fucking guy is running after us. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. I knew at that point, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this guy is only running to catch us. Well, not us per se, but my brother. He's started to gain, but he's not close enough yet. I whipped back around and sped up to my personal max speed. And of course, my little brother pumps his own legs to the max, because he wants to win a race against his sister so he can brag about it. Once again, I'm looking directly at him more than the street in front of me, so I can be sure he's still there with me. I hear his thuds on the pavement, and I know he's getting close. My heart was sending electrical currents of fear to the rest of my body, and just as I heard him coming up right behind us, we hit the stadium grounds. It was a sharp left turn, and bam. People. There were people everywhere. It was halftime, and the adults were out in the entrance area smoking and talking. The view of the entranceway, and all the people, was obscured by a stone archway on the street, marking the stadium grounds. I had never been so happy to see a bunch of sweaty rednecks in all of my life. The guy came right behind, and the second he turned the corner after us and saw all the people, he panicked. I could see the surprise and fear in his eyes. I had turned around at that moment to see where he was, and I looked right at him and locked eyes with him in this beautiful moment. He looked around at everyone, looked at me, looked at my brother, and walked away, back the way we had all come. Ross was out of breath, but still nudged me to go and call Austin. I said, "Give me just a second." I peeked around the stone archway and watched this guy walk, not run, but walk, back up the street. I stood there and watched him walk all the way back up the hill, walk across the street, get back into his SUV, and drive away. I think that's when it fully hit me, of the very real situation we were just in, and the very real danger. That fucking guy was there to get us. Well, not me, but my brother. What's more, he probably would have got us, had we not made it to the stadium. The crowd spooked him, and most likely, that's what saved my brother's life. We found Austin, but I made the whole gang wait until the game was over, and caught a ride with his folks. No burden on them, we lived right next door. I was shaken up for the rest of the night and for a couple of days after. This kind of town is the last place in the world where you have thoughts about being snatched in. I also have never told anyone. I never told my parents. I never told my brother. He's almost 20 years old now and could probably handle it, but I just never saw a reason to give him a complex about something that happened years ago. I also never told the police, and I have no idea what happened to the gold SUV guy. I don't know if he lived around here or far away. I don't know if he's been caught, went to jail, or if he's still out there somewhere. I do know for certain though, that he was there to kidnap my brother that day. I don't know what kind of fucked up plans he had for him, but then again, I don't care to dwell on it. I don't know if I did the right thing or the wrong thing, or just how close my brother came to whatever the fuck SUV guy had in the works, but I don't care to dwell on that either. I can tell you, however, that there was once a time in my life in which I meaningfully uttered the phrase, "Thank fuck for sweaty rednecks." Number 9. This is a long time ago, late 90s. When I was 19, I moved from Oregon to Florida to be with my boyfriend at the time. I was thinking white sand beaches and Mickey Mouse, but instead got the swamp, bugs and dirt roads. It was a huge shock to the system. We lived in this stinky little town called Hawthorne, just outside of Gainesville. Very small, 1 stoplight and 4 stores. Dollar General, Steve's Market, Eckert's Pharmacy and Sony's BBQ. Anyway, I got a job at the now defunct Eckert's in the middle of town. It was next to the grocery store, so everyone shopped there. After about 3 months or so working there, I walked in to start my shift one day, when the manager pulled me into his office. Laid out on his desk was about 30 to 40 open letters, all addressed by hand, to me. "Do you know this person?" my manager asked. "No, I don't." "Read one." So I picked the cheerful yellow one. Inside were 2 handwritten letters and a magazine cut out of a woman with long blonde hair, just like me. As the Eckerd manager watched on, I read the letter. I skipped around a lot of the confusion, desperately trying to find out why I'm in this room. From what I read, it was mostly someone imagining what spending time with me would be like. A lot of it was sexual in nature. There were descriptions and comments about my hair, washing it, smelling it, and something about the moonlight. A few sentences were highlighted, others were underlined. My first thought was, am I getting fired? "Do you know this David Elrod?" I said yes, I think so. The tall, lanky guy with thick glasses and frizzy dark blonde hair. The regular who comes in a couple of times a week and picks up a Diet Coke and medication for his mum. Late 20s and obviously socially or mentally challenged. On rare occasions, he would make small talk as I rang up his soda. Once or twice, he would linger at my register or stare at me, but I figured he was just trying to adjust his eyes or just had poor social cues. Harmless compared to some of the other people I had met in Florida, so I didn't pay him any mind. Until that day in the Eckerd's office. I knew he wrote the letters because of a strange encounter 2 weeks earlier. While working, he came up behind me and caressed my hair. I had to remove it from his hands and he apologized. Weird. No harm. I went back to work. After telling my manager this, he informed me that the customer was going to be banned from the store and I was being sent home while they work out the details. What details? Confused, I walked out of the store and drove home. Strange. 2 hours after I got home from my non-shift at work, there is a knock on my door. I look out the window and see what resembles a SWAT team. What the hell is going on? I saw men in tactical gear with large weapons, 2 men dressed in suits and several uniformed cops. And in what seemed like slow motion at the time, I opened the door. A female officer holds up a few oddly familiar letters. Can we come in and talk to you about these? Realizing everyone in town has read the letters, I wanted to pass the fuck out. I don't even know the guy. We have a seat on my couch and she begins to speak. Out of the corner of my eye, I see my boyfriend shooting me dirty looks from the bedroom. The female officer mentions getting the letters from Eckerd's and attempting to issue a trespassing notice. They wanted to speak to him directly, she says, because her whole department is aware of David. The officers confronted him at his residence and attempted to evoke the trespassing notice from Eckerd's store. Apparently, he was not happy about this. He insisted for over 45 minutes how this was all a big mistake and I wanted to talk to him. He was so combative and persistent, they decided to pursue stalking charges. Stalking charges? She continues. You need to be aware, young lady, that David killed and partially dismembered his mother when he was 12 years old. He was released from a juvenile psychiatric facility less than 4 years ago. We found disturbing materials at his home. She continued. We believe he's been stalking you. My mind went wandering. David was arrested the next day for stalking after he was found in the Eckerd's parking lot, but the last official word was that he went back to the psychiatric hospital, at least temporarily. I didn't have the chance to read the letters in full before they were entered into some vault of evidence, nor did they explain what they found at his house, so I never had the complete picture of what was happening. I could only imagine what a crazy person would be thinking. My boyfriend at the time was a huge dick about the whole thing, so I moved back to Oregon a week later. Number 10. So, this story is about a man that I've never met. I don't know his name or his face. I was blissfully unaware of his very existence. I'll never know why or when it started. I'm glad for that, I guess. I moved into my very small apartment in February last year. My landlord, Olivia, was a sweet, older woman who would cook too much and bring me much appreciated leftovers. She was great to me, even after telling her my problem. I'm antisocial, but she didn't mind renting to a reclusive younger girl who reminded her of her daughter. Every few weeks she would knock on my door then leave, letting me know that she was leaving something for me. I loved that. Not even my family would cook so well. The next morning I wash and leave her empty containers outside my door, and by an hour or so she would take them back again. My other neighbours seemed fine, but I never talked or visited with them. I work from home, so anytime I was ever forced to go out, I rushed out and into my apartment, avoiding an uncomfortable situation. I loved living alone. It was everything I hoped for. I could just breathe. By April though, I started noticing things were not right. They were moving, or plain disappearing. I was convinced that it was just anxiety caused by my new medication and the move. Another side effect was it would make me so drowsy. Since I hated seeing the doctor, I just dealt with it. I took naps during the day now and eventually stopped caring. until one incident doubled my paranoia. Olivia brought me some sort of Greek tossed salad and dressing for lunch one day, and I enjoyed it with my best friend, Netflix. I fell asleep in the middle of Portlandia and woke up that evening at 5 PM. Per usual. What was not usual was my bedding on the opposite side of me was disturbed. I only sleep on the right hand side. Always. Even more, it felt warm. My first thought was I must have rolled over around a lot, but I knew it was too odd to dismiss. I got up and searched my apartment, gripping my phone with 911 typed in. Nothing else was disturbed. Everything was exactly like it should be. I let it go for the next few weeks and everything was normal, except the occasional misplaced shoe or drawn back shower curtain. I thought about telling someone, my parents, maybe Olivia, but if it's not life or death, I'm not reaching out to anyone. I wasn't scared, I was nervous, maybe a little stubborn, but I stayed. I'm not letting some stupid anxiety ruin my lovely lonely world. May came and it was getting worse. My panties, toothbrush, hell, even my food was being misplaced. Every time I woke up, there was this strange odor in the air. I finally realized that this won't go away by ignoring it. I called my mum and begged to come and stay a few days. When I got home, I told them everything. Saying it out loud solidified any creepy suspicions. That weekend, my dad went to my apartment and what was found was true horror. Written all over the walls were the words, "Come back, baby please." He ran out and called the police. There was no one living in my apartment, but someone definitely had access besides me. The investigation revealed a man, Henry, the son of my landlord Olivia, was in a projected relationship with me. They showed me his confession on tape. He admitted coming into my apartment every night and every day with his mother's extra key. He claims we were in love and that he had my permission. He drugged his mother's food that she had left out for me, causing my drowsiness and falling asleep so he could come in and watch me sleep, touch my hair, kiss my shoulder, and so on. The leftovers I had in the fridge were tested and confirmed. I was absolutely horrified and disgusted. A man I never knew existed collected my drain hair, clothes, and trash, and practically lived in my apartment for 4 months. Number 11. So basically, my boyfriend and I live in a flat together, and he's an area manager for a main chain restaurant in England. His job takes him to at least 5 to 8 stores and sometimes has to stay late. Sometimes he doesn't get here until 3 AM, so I usually sort of stay up and wait for him to make sure that he's alright, if he wants me to run a hot bath for him and wants a coffee or anything. So I get the usual phone call from him saying, "I'm on my way home, I'll be home in an hour. If I drop call you when I'm close, then just start running a bath for me please." I say sure and hang up. Now, our block of flats has this security door that always gets locked at 10 PM, and as long as you have a main entry key, you're free to come and go without worrying about the door. I'm nestling down to watch some Netflix and a cup of tea and a cheeky biscuit when I hear our buzzer to our flat go off. Now, someone outside the main entrance is pressing my number, and I have to press this switch from inside my flat that will open the main security door and let them in. It's probably someone who's forgotten their key and pressed my number quickly. I try and shrug it off. I pause the film that I'm watching and wait. The buzzer rings again, stops and then rings again. Sounds like someone's deliberately putting their finger on it and holding it down. Now, our flat is on the 2nd floor, and from our bedroom we can look down and see who's at the main gate. I jump up, go into that room, and slowly peek to see who's there. I saw 5 well-built, stocky guys. This is 2 AM. What the hell are they doing here? Why are they ringing my buzzer? It suddenly becomes clear to me that whoever it is clearly doesn't have a key, so they mustn't live here. While peeking at them, I clearly see the front guy put his hand up and just press my buzzer, flat number 4. He's not even touching the other buttons, just mine. Half of me wants to pick my flat phone up and be like, "Seriously, get lost. I don't know what you want, but I'll call the police. And then the other half of me doesn't want to give away the fact that I'm a girl, alone. It sounds silly, but I'm 23 and I'm quite small. I grab my phone and ring my boyfriend straight away. He says something along the lines of the fact that he's 45 minutes away and that he'll be there as soon as possible, but will call his dad, Luke, who's a policeman, to come over and wait with me. While I'm on the phone, the buzzer is still going. He tells me to just keep peeking at them and try and see if I can see any distinguishing features. After what seemed like ages, my boyfriend's dad turns up, and I see him walk straight up to the guys and start a conversation. My boyfriend's dad already has a security key, and he opens the door to my flat. Straight away he runs over to me and makes sure that I'm fine. We're sitting down, having a cup of tea, and I ask what was said and what happened. He said that he walked up to the main road, and the conversation went like this.
Hey man, do you live here? Do you think you could let us in?
Well, clearly if you don't have a key, you don't live here, so no. Who are you supposed to be seeing?
Well, you see, my main girl lives in number 4, man, and she's gone to sleep, huh? You know how late it is, man. These are my friends and they don't have anywhere to stay, and I haven't got a key. So how about you let us in?
That's funny, because my daughter lives there.
Oh yeah? Shit, dude. Well, how about letting us in and we can see her together?
Right, now, I don't know who you are or what you're planning to do, but seriously, stay the fuck away from these flats. You clearly don't live here. If you ever come back here, I will personally arrest each and every one of you wankers. Now, fuck off and go home, because I swear to God I'll beat the shit out of every one of you guys so bad that no one will recognize you. With that, the group of guys took off and Luke managed to open the door freely and get in. And that's where it ended, thankfully. Number 12. Years ago, when I was in 2nd grade, my parents one Monday morning finally felt confident in allowing me to come home from school by myself and stay home without a babysitter until they came home. That morning my father gave me the house key, showed me the emergency numbers in the yellow book, and gave me instructions on what to do if stupid things happened like the house catching on fire. After school that day, I came home, put the key in the door, and walked into my open house. I felt free and I felt privileged that I was finally a big boy, and that I could now be home on my own. Needless to say, I kinda got caught up in the moment and ate tons of ice cream while watching Terminator on VHS, since my parents would never let me watch anything over PG-13. Around 5 that day, I heard the doorbell ring. My dad told me never to answer the door by myself, even if they were home. I walked to our family room, where I could get a good view of who was out there. Maybe my dad was getting a package or something. I saw a middle-aged man standing there in a dark black jacket that I've never seen before. He rang the doorbell again, and I expected him to leave after no one answered. After a 3rd ring, I saw him walk down the steps and I assumed he was leaving. I went back to watching Terminator when I noticed something outside my kitchen window. The man was walking in our backyard for some odd reason. I felt scared for my life since some stranger was on my property. I ran under the kitchen table and grabbed the cordless phone from the counter and proceeded to call my dad's work number. My dad answered, and I exclaimed how some strange man was in the backyard and was now proceeding to try and open our sliding door. My dad told me to stay where I was and call the neighbors. He would call 911. I told my dad that I loved him, and he said that he would call me back immediately after he called 911. Before I could call my neighbors, the man was able to somehow open our family room window. I feared for my life and ran to the bathroom and locked the door and called our neighbors. After about 30 seconds, I heard my neighbor running through our house shouting my name to see if I was okay. She said how she couldn't see anyone in the house and stayed in the bathroom with me until the police arrived. The police conducted their investigation and told us that they found some fingerprints that matched the recently released convict who was previously put in jail for breaking into homes. After that day, my parents did not leave me without a babysitter until I went to high school. Every week I wonder what happened. Did he run when he saw someone was in the house? Did my neighbor scare him away if he heard her yelling? Needless to say, after that day, and even after I was allowed to stay at home without a babysitter, I never stayed home alone. I was either at a friend's house or an after-school program until my parents came home. I feel unsafe being home alone. Number 13. This happened to my wife and I right after I left the Marines. After leaving the military, I was obsessed with jogging and hiking. I liked pushing myself to see how much weight I could carry and how far I could run and hike. Every Sunday morning at 5 in the morning, my wife would drive me 8 miles from our apartment. I would road march with a heavy pack through town back home. This particular Sunday was very warm. She dropped me off at the location. We said our goodbyes and she returned to the apartment. It's not terribly dangerous where we live, but having done some combat deployments, I was always aware of my surroundings. Therefore, I was carrying the handgun that was typically located in our bedroom. When my wife returned to the apartment, she noticed that there was a white Honda which was parked near the front of our unit. She thought this was odd because it was so early on a Sunday morning. She thought about not getting out of her car because she was a little creeped out. She decided to go in but walked quickly. She got back into bed to try and get some sleep while I hiked home. Our apartment was a ground level unit, and there was a large bush located in front of our window with gravel surrounding it. As she lay in bed, she heard some slight shifting of the gravel. She laid there silently listening. Then she heard heavy breathing, which she said sounded like there was someone with their lips right to our window. Due to the heat, our window was open, and there was still a screen and large drapes. My wife laid there silently for several minutes while the breathing continued. I don't know what came over her, but she got ballsy. She jumped up on the bed and threw the drapes open. She saw a grown man standing there, who immediately turned around the corner of the wall out of view. She didn't say anything to this man, but could see his shadow from the light above the door to the unit next to ours. The man stood there, still breathing really heavily. She described it as almost intentionally loud. In a flash, the man took off in a dead sprint for the white Honda. My wife said that she had no idea what to do because she was so terrified he would return. She grabbed the K-bar, which is a large military-style fixed blade knife that I kept underneath the mattress. She waited for about 5 minutes before running out of the house and getting in her car. She drove the route that I had told her I would be hiking and found me. I remember it so clearly because my wife's car pulled up and she was bawling and had my large knife in her hands. She explained everything. She drove me home and I called the police on the way. When we arrived, the white Honda was gone. The police and apartment reported that they had received reports of suspicious activity happening recently in the early mornings. He was never caught to my knowledge. It creeps me out to this day that someone is still out there, probably getting brazen every time he gets away with something. Not as scary as some of these, but when you consider how close your loved one could have come, it just gives me the creeps. Number 14. To begin with, I want to explain where we lived. We lived out in the foothills on 5 acres of land down a gravel road. We owned horses and pigs and all that jazz. No houses close. However, you could cross a creek behind the house and over a small town hill to a gated community. However, you would never want to go outside due to the mountain lions lurking around at night. Needless to say, other than our floodlights on the house, there were no lights around, ever. So one night, my dad was working late, which ironically never happened. My brother, myself and my mum were home alone in our very large house. I was only about 6 years old, but I remember all of this vividly. For whatever reason, I was sleeping in my parents' room with my mum that night, and my brother in his room. All of a sudden my brother comes bursting in the bedroom around 3 AM, slams and locks my parents' bedroom door, and says that he's hearing someone whispering his name and telling him to come out and play. That sounds like it's coming from the closet or from the window, which are right next to each other. My mum, thinking that my brother is dreaming or that his neighbor friend across the creek is messing around with him, especially since our rooms were on the second floor, makes us wait in her room and goes to check things out. When she walks in, she hears some shuffling noises towards the window and hurries back into the bedroom and locks it. She calls the police, who show up 20 to 30 minutes later, while we sit quietly staring out at her window to see if anything is there. Police search the house and property and find nothing but roof shinglings on our front yard, which is where my brother's room faces. Side note, our house had a small little awning over the front porch, so someone could easily walk on it in front of our second-story windows facing the front yard. However, they warned us that there are many hiding places around the house, so they will monitor the house for a bit. Around 6 AM, my dad gets home to police sitting outside. He informs them that he saw a man jogging down our gravel road towards the main road wearing all dark clothing. They thought it was strange since, 1, in our area you don't ever go jogging early in the morning because that's when mountain lions feed, and 2, he was not in any type of workout gear. Turns out, they caught the guy and he was breaking into homes in the gated community and tried to lure kids walking from the bus stop to his car. So, scary man whispering to my brother, let's not meet. Number 15. Alright, so my next door neighbour's parents moved from India to the UK back in the 1960s. After retiring, they made a habit of heading back there every year to visit family and friends, ultimately spending around half their time travelling through India and half their time here. Long story short, one year, they invite my family along. I was 15, now 25, and thought that I was some badass Viking rock prince because I had long blonde hair and red kerang. Now, my neighbour's dad has planned this holiday like it's a military campaign. When we arrive, he hands each of us, including my 11-year-old brother and sister, a brown folder containing our itinerary, hotel brochures, money conversion charts, train timetables, 4 passport photos of ourselves for forms, etc., and a list of names under the header, useful people. Forget Viking rock prince, I'm James fucking Bond. Other than the fact that I was mistaken for a girl on several occasions, I had an amazing time. Until we rock up to this huge hotel in the middle of the jungle. Honestly, the arse end of nowhere. The nearest village is a 3-hour drive down a dirt road. Just before sunset in the fucking jungle, I pull out the brochure. And it'd be safe to say that the place is under new management. There is a single light on about 5 stories up. As we pull into the drive, we spot a group of men clustered around a large fire. One of them stands and starts shouting something, but is silenced by the guy next to him with a slap to the back of his head. One of the group members comes sauntering over and motions our driver to wind down the window. Imagine Alfred Hitchcock as an Indian drug lord, and you'll have a pretty good idea of the man now flapping his jowls through our window. He peers into the back, spots us, and cracks a dictionary definition of a shit-eating grin. In broken English, he welcomes us to the hotel, glances over our reservations, and ushers us into the lobby. This is when shit gets really weird. The place is deserted. Not the staff have gone to bed deserted. It was like whoever was here fucking noped out of this place in a hurry deserted. There were toppled chairs in the lobby. Hitchcock tells us that our rooms aren't ready. It's now 9 PM and offers us some food while we wait. The dining room is huge, empty, and our order is taken by a boy no older than 9 who promptly vanishes, closing the doors behind him. We hear a motorbike engine outside, and an hour later, something vaguely resembling our order appears on a variety of mismatched dinnerware. No idea where any of it came from. At this point, we were all pretty unnerved and everyone started making lame jokes to ease the tension. We were only there for one night, and everything had been paid for in advance, and we were a large group of 11, with 2 people who spoke Hindi and Konkani, so we felt pretty sure we could deal with any weirdness. Hitchcock waddles in and takes us to our rooms. Every one of them is stripped bare, apart from the beds and bedside tables. Exposed wires poke out of the walls where you'd expect a TV and or a phone, and there are rectangular patches of discolored wallpaper suggesting that someone finally took a stand against terrible hotel artwork. The only decoration is this creepy little metal horse that's just sitting on one of the bedside tables. I'm sharing a room with my little brother and insist on taking the bed closest to the door, presumably thinking that I could summon Thor if things got hairy. Hitchcock lingers in our doorway for a while, flashing his pearly browns and giving me the rape eyes. I close the door on him and we dump our bags, check the door is locked, and have some bro chats until we pass out. I woke up, no idea what time it was, to hear the door to my room clicking shut. The door that is not further than a foot from my head. Fuck that. I'm no Viking rock prince, I'm a flying baby that plays a harp. I cower under the surprisingly clean blankets until my heart stops threatening to bust out of my ribs. Stealthy ninja roll out of my bed and to the door. The bastard is unlocked. Fuck this. Barricade that shit with the bedside table, check little brother is alive, get into bed, see our bags, add them to the barricade, and notice that mine is open. My bag is open. Fuck this. Now, here's the strange part. Nothing's missing. Camera, wallet, clothes, super secret spy dossier, everything is intact. I convinced myself that I shat my pants over nothing and got back to sleep. Side note, my little brother slept through the whole thing. Morning comes and we all want to get out of there as soon as possible. The neighbor's dad kicks off about how weird the whole thing is to Hitchcock and gets us half of our money back. Excellent. We head out and my sister points out the charred remains of one of the hotel beds in what's left of the fire pit. Excellent. Turns out that our driver, who had a room in the place, had decided to sleep in the bus because, in his own words, he didn't want their funny business. Apparently, there were people coming and going out all night. He woke up to see a guy, nose against the window, just staring in at him. The driver hit the window and the dude scampered off into the jungle like fucking Mowgli. We give the driver an extra huge tip. Hitchcock waves at us from the lobby, adjusts his crotch, and plods back in. We leave, thinking the weirdness is over. About an hour into the journey, I decide to take a look at our itinerary, so I pull out my spy folder. My heart instantly sinks. One of my passport photos is gone, a perfect 35 by 45mm rectangle missing from the corner. 3 little Viking rock cherubs stare up at me, mourning their fallen brother. I search the folder, ask my parents if they took it for something, start losing my shit. Everything from the night before rushes back. I explain what happened, and there's this weird moment of silence while everyone looks at each other. Turns out that everybody heard someone outside at their door at some point during the night, but made sure to deadbolt their doors before going to sleep. Bro, I had no deadbolt. Hitchcock put us in that fucking room on purpose. The driver suggests that we head back to the hotel and demand satisfaction. Tips galore for driver. We drive all the way back to the hotel. The doors are padlocked. Hitchcock and his cronies have vanished. The cherry on top of this mindfuck cake is the horse. The little metal horse that was sat on our bedside table has been placed on the step in front of the doors. I took it. Free souvenir. Fuck you, Hitchcock. So that's where this creepy, strange incident finished. And I hope I really never see these guys again. Number 16. This event happened to 2 close friends of mine who were living together in a small 2-bedroom apartment in the Lower East Side. It's a short story, but I thought it was terrifying both because of what happened and what could have happened. Their apartment was on the 5th floor of a 5-story building. The building directly adjacent to them was only 4 stories, and the view from their living room window was the roof of the building, so they rarely bothered to draw their curtains or lock their windows. One night, both of my friends were in their bedrooms, getting ready for bed. They heard a crash outside and ran to the living room window, where they looked down. 5 stories below them, they could see the dark figure of a man sprawled in the alleyway. They immediately called the police, who arrived and confirmed that the man was dead and had died instantly upon impact. Next to his body, the police found a wooden plank and were able to piece together the manner of his death. Apparently, the man had been watching my friends for a while and decided that night to traverse the gap from the roof of the next door building to the window of their living room using only a wooden board. There was a small knife in his pocket. This was extremely traumatizing for both of my friends, who had no idea they were essentially being stalked. Even though this happened in 2012 and they no longer live together or in that building, they both confided that they still have trouble being in their house alone. I don't really blame them. So creepy deceased stalker, I'm very relieved that my friends did not ever have to formally meet you.